Well, folks, I'm so glad that you're able to join us tonight for this Waypoint 55 webinar. Whether you're joining us tonight or whether you're joining us on our YouTube channel, we just appreciate you being with us. My name is Neil Wheeler. I'm Director of Leader Care with Waypoint Church Partners, and we at Waypoint, we just exist to catalyze kingdom growth. And we do that in a couple of ways. Number one, by church planting. Since 1938, this is an exciting number. We've planted 160 churches since 1938, and that's really cool. Our next one will be online in January down in Kinston, North Carolina. We're excited about that. But the other way that we catalyze kingdom growth is by partnering with existing churches, just to help them get on mission, stay on mission. And the reason for that is we just envision an ever-increasing number of thriving leaders and churches. We know that when leaders thrive, churches will thrive. And so we try to provide ministry tools for church leaders, not just pastors, but elders and other types of lay leaders to be able to help their church thrive, because we just want to see the kingdom of God grow in our region and around the world. We're real excited about several things that we have to offer you at Waypoint. I'll share my screen here and show a few of those things for you. Our Waypoint podcast, we have two of those, and my co-workers Dyke McCord and Rebecca Hott do a leadership podcast that drops 2 times a month, and those are really exciting podcasts. I think the most recent one features Cam Huxford, and then the last one of the year is always favorite stories of the Waypoint staff, and that's always a really popular one too. It's fun to be able to record that and just share a story from our own personal experiences as part of the Waypoint staff. The other podcast that we have is the Waypoint Pastors' Wives podcast, and it is exciting to see the number of people that log into both of those. And we just got a report last week at our staff retreat, and Becca Hott shared with us the numbers of people that log into both of those podcasts. That's really exciting. But then also, about 6 years ago, we started doing what we call the Waypoint 55 webinar. And we have webinars on all sorts of topics for leaders. And so the best way, and most people watch, honestly, rather than being live, more people will watch after the fact on our YouTube channel. And you can just go there to Waypoint Church Partners on the web and find our YouTube channel. And then our waypoints are categorized under various different topics, and you can go in and find what you want to read, learn more about, whether it might be prayer or security in your church or how to have a better greeter ministry. And that's what that is all about. We always want to thank our sponsors at MACU for sponsoring our webinar, and they have been with us from the very beginning. We just really appreciate them so very much. I want to tell you, at the bottom of your page, very bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A button, and as we're going through the webinar tonight, if you might happen to have any questions at all, you can click on that Q&A button, and I'll see it in the queue and be able to answer or point to one of our panelists to answer your question. Or if all else fails, we can get back with you in a follow-up email to answer your questions. So I'm really thrilled to be able to have 3 of my friends on the call tonight. You know, Christmas is absolutely the busiest time of year for a pastor. And I don't know whether these guys love me or love you as leaders, or they're just crazy to add something else to their Christmas week schedule. But I'm really, really excited that they did, and they're online with us. And we're going to be talking about a subject that's important to their hearts. We sent out a poll earlier in the fall and just asked for pastors to respond to the question, have you done a sabbatical? And these three guys were the first three that chimed in and said, "Yeah, I've done that. Would you like to share your story?" And these guys all said yes, they would. So I'm really thrilled that they're here and that they're going to share their story tonight. And that's really, really cool. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and get over here and start talking with these guys. And I want to introduce my buddies, Gregg Jennings, and he's at Common Ground in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Also, Scott Haulter, and he's in Greensboro, North Carolina, at Catalyst Church. Both of those were Waypoint Church plants back. It had been some time now. And then, thirdly, have my really good friend Joe Thompson, who's at Smithfield in Smithfield, Virginia. All three of them are in great churches that are doing great kingdom stuff. And I just want y'all to share, each one of you, just share briefly your personal sabbatical story, and set it up first about how long. Number one, how long you've been in ministry total, how long you've been at your current church, and then talk about your sabbatical, how long it was. Did you travel out of town for the whole thing, or did you stay at home? It probably would help for people to know the age of your children, if you have children still at home. So, Gregg, I'm going to let you go first, and so tell us about your sabbatical, if you would.
Sure. I hope everybody can hear me okay. And again, my name is Gregg Jennings. So I was on sabbatical this year in 2023. It was a 3-month sabbatical from the middle of May through the middle of August. And I have a 16-year-old, 6-year-old, and an almost 2-year-old. I've been in ministry for about 25 years. I've been at Common Ground for almost 16 years, and this is my second sabbatical with this church. The first sabbatical with Common Ground, I was 5 years into the church work. I was recently separated and divorced early in my ministry here at this church, and I felt like I had given everything I could. I said, I either need to resign or I need to quit. And they said, how about a sabbatical? And so that first sabbatical, I stayed close because I'm still a single dad at that point, and still, at that point. And so that was the first one, almost 10 years ago, in 2013. And then now 10 years later, this one was, again, 3 months long. Wonderful, wonderful experience. There's so much more I could tell. I want to give some room for these guys to talk about it. For me, the one thing that I did, I packed too much in over the summer. Not work, but I packed too much travel in. I was so excited not to work that I traveled too much. And then I've got more to share, but I want to let these guys have a moment.
Well, Scott, how about you? Tell us about your length of time in ministry, length of time at Catalyst, and then kind of a snapshot of your sabbatical story.
Yeah, my name is Scott Haulter. Been in ministry full-time, 22 years. Started Catalyst October of 2009, so we're 14 years in. I took my sabbatical in 2018. It sort of came later on, about 3 years into starting Catalyst. I burned out, depression, anxiety, couldn't make myself go in the office, couldn't get off the couch, and being as extroverted as I was, like, I knew it was bad times. But God slowly brought me through that. Probably took me another 3 years or so to get back from that. And when 2018 started coming together, I felt it coming again. And I was like, I can't go through that again. So I was able to go talk to my elders at that point and set up, looking back at it, I think it was an 8-week sabbatical, but for 5 or 6 weeks, I didn't preach. I was completely gone. And the last 2, I only showed up on Sunday, preached. I walked in late. I left early. I I'm sort of a grinder. So even as I was trying to heal, I still just packed a ton of stuff in, books that I had to read, people I had to talk to and spend time with, trying to grow and get ready for the next thing. And I'll do that a little bit different next time around.
The similarities between y'all stories are amazing. I read a quote that said most pastors go into sabbatical for one of two reasons: either out of despair or out of planning. You know, it's planned and that sort of thing. And so I concur, Scott, with all right, man, I'm done. I'll talk about my sabbatical in a little bit. Joe, your turn.
Yeah, so I'm in a different context than the other guys. I'm at a church. We've been Smithfield Christian Church has been around since 1960, and as far as I know, I'm the first to take a sabbatical here at the church. I've been in ministry since 2002, but I've been here at SCC for 9 years now, and it was around the 7-year mark. I get the 5-year itch. No matter where I am, every 5 years, I start to get the itch of like something new and I don't know what and all that. And I started to feel that. And out of a desire to not lose my mind, I said, I need to do something to kind of take a step back and kind of really pray through and give God some space to speak to me, give me some direction. I'm sure these guys can, agree that in ministry, and I know everybody who's watching feels this way, that in ministry, it can feel like I equate it to the factory machine that like you can't turn it off. Like Sunday's coming and there's no getting out of the way of it. And so I was just kind of in a spot where I needed some time to breathe and really get my head around stuff. And so I approached my leadership with this. And I am extremely blessed with leaders that are constantly on our staff about taking time away. In fact, they were texting us this morning about, your kids are out of school, you should not be in the office, and yada, yada, yada. But so I took a 5-week sabbatical. This was, like I said, the very first one for this church. And so 5 weeks where I was gone. The only connection I had to the church was I recorded a selfie video once a week that I texted to our production team, and then they used that part of the welcome time on Sundays just because they wanted to have a connection for if there were new folks to be able to see the face of, the pastor or whatever and kind of keep a connection. But other than that, I was gone and didn't have any kind of role or involvement with the church. It was funny when my family would show up to church and I was at a different church in town or somewhere else and they were kind of looking around for me. But yeah.
Cool stories. I was about 28 years into ministry. I did 38 years preaching in North Carolina, Winston-Salem, and Richmond, and about 35 years at Chester Christian. And I was about 25 years into my ministry when I went to my elders to say, "Hey, could I take a sabbatical?" And we were extremely missions-minded church, and a lot of short-term mission trips and solid support, financially prayer support, and working with various different missionaries. And I was offered the chance by a guy that was a pastor in New South Wales, Australia, in Newcastle, Australia, and he said, "Neil, can you come and just spell me for 9 months?" And I said, "No, I can give you 6 weeks." And so I did that. And now the funny thing about it was, we'll talk about how we prepared for sabbaticals. I didn't read anything about doing sabbatical. I didn't talk to very many people about doing sabbatical. I didn't realize that going to a much smaller church than where I was currently serving, but going there to lead worship and preach on Sunday morning and teach a couple Bible studies and youth group was not that restful to me. You know what I'm saying? And but that was my sabbatical story. So let me ask you, kind of poll the group. How many of you can give a thumbs up or thumbs down on, does your church have a sabbatical policy? It's written down that every so many years everybody on staff takes sabbatical. No, one up, one down, and then one kind of sideways. My church did not have a sabbatical policy at all. And so I want to ask the question and give you a chance to think about it. How did you broach, Joe, and Scott, the idea of y'all taking a sabbatical? How did you do that? Gregg, it was already in your policy. And so for Gregg, it's more, what would you want to say to a pastor who's scratching his head saying, man, I need that. I just don't know how to do that. And what would you recommend? I want to set y'all up by saying, like I said already, for my sabbatical, I had no prep whatsoever. And I didn't prep my elders. I didn't set them up for it. I didn't give them any teaching. I just walked into a meeting one night and like, dumb me, hey guys, I'd like to take a sabbatical. Are y'all good for that? I want to do 6 weeks. I'm going to be in Australia. Would y'all be cool with that? And they said no. And I thought my next statement, and I don't blame them. Looking back on now, I was just a knucklehead. So the next statement was, guys, I have banked vacation time. I've got 6 weeks vacation. So I'm going to take 6 weeks off vacation. And so y'all gonna pay me for my vacation time. I'm gonna do this sabbatical thing. I'm gonna be out of Dodge, and y'all don't have to pay anything for my flights. My wife has covered our flights to Australia through her job, and so y'all don't have to pay a dime. And I'm out of here for 6 weeks, and so that's not the way to ask at all. So Scott, how did you do the asking?
Well, for me, the elders that were on with me at that point were a part of the church early on, but they hadn't become elders yet, and they saw me burn out. 2 of the elders that were on when I took my sabbatical have been 2 of my closest friends for years now, and they remember me burning out, and they saw it coming again, sort of like I did. So when I was like, guys, I got to do something. Here's what my coach is telling me. I need to look at doing a sabbatical. And I was being coached by, I still am being coached by Aaron Couch. And they were like, you do whatever you need to. We can't have you go through that again. You tell us what you need us to do and how long it needs to be and whatever it is. Having the relational equity that I had with the guys, that they've been with me long enough. They saw the first time around and how bad it was. Didn't want to spend 3 or 4 years trying to let me heal back up to go through that again. That they were like, we don't know what this is, but if you say you need it, we're in. And I was able to go and set it up from there, and it was really good.
Scott, I appreciate you using the phrase relational equity. That is huge for guys thinking about how can I get there. It is about that relational equity and building that over time. Joe, how about you? How'd you do
For
that?
me, well, for me, I everybody's context is different, and I guess I have similar elders to Scott, to where they are very very aware and very protective. But it's interesting because I had a guy who was still a part of our church that was no longer an elder when I took my sabbatical, that kind of said to me, I don't really know why he felt he needed to say this, but that that he felt that I didn't need that long of a vacation. And if he would have been an elder, it probably would not have happened. And so really a lot of it was God's timing. And so, for me, if I was talking to another pastor who was considering it, I would tell them to really start early on discussions with their leaders, of not, like you mentioned, Neil, not just walking in and trying to drop it on them, but to really talk through the value of it, even to do some teaching from the pulpit and preaching about the needing of rest and the needing of time away, and to also paint the picture of what a sabbatical is really all about, that it's not about just a vacation, but that of what it is helping to bring a pastor out of, and also what it's trying to bring them into and lead them into by that refreshing time. So it's not just seen as, well, who we're paying some other guy to preach for 2 months or whatever, but more of the long-term benefits that it is for all the staff whenever they take sabbaticals in that way.
I was reading the other day about reactions that people in your church would typically have toward, like, our pastor is going to take a sabbatical, and some people are totally on board. There were four of them. I can't remember all four. Some people are totally on board. Other people are kind of the quiet. You don't know, you don't know how they feel. There'll be some people that are vocally critical, and I can deal with them better than the schemers behind the scenes. But I remember that author was saying it's so important, rather than just ignoring those folks, go talk to them. Go talk to them. So, Greg, let's throw it at you, and
Yeah.
come with an idea, perhaps of a guy that's in a church whose leadership would seem to be reluctant. How would you encourage him or instruct him to do an ask?
Well, my gut says for that person to leave and find a different church. That's my gut, because if you're not in an area that supports and values, because nothing says I love you, nothing says we support you, nothing says we are behind you, pastor. There's no way to love us than better. It's not an extra month's paycheck. That doesn't say it. It's not, you know, childcare on Valentine's night. It's not that. It is giving us the space that we need because there's no stress like pastoral stress. I mean, there's ER doctor stress. It's different. There's lawyer stress, but there's just no stress like pastor stress. So for a young pastor, I would say slow and steady wins the race, that you have to develop a culture, as Joe was saying, of sabbatical rest, of Sabbath rest. You have to plan that into your rhythms. One of the things that we have at Common Ground is just the underarching belief that we, as the body of Christ, as an organization of the body of Christ, should not look like Quantico. We should not look like Geico. We should not look like GE. We need to look like the kingdom of God and treat our employees thus. And so we give the same, whether it's male or female staff or pastors on our team, parental leave, 3 months, no questions asked, just go be with your baby. So we have precedent in place already for times. And here's, in the last 24 months, I have had a baby. And so I've had 3 months off for a baby. And I've had a sabbatical, and I've had 3 months off for a sabbatical. So for the last 24 months, I've not worked for 6 of them. And so you train the people to love you. You train them to represent the kingdom of God. If the kingdom of God were to treat their people well, what does work look like? What does rest look like? And what does that balance look like? And we've laid that groundwork early on, Scott, as you're saying, as we hit the grind, we just go for it until we burn out. And so for us on our end, we love the community and love the church in the way that they have treated us and pastored us. So for me, last year in February, before going on sabbatical in May, we led a seminar for our church called Let the Body Preach. And all about it was, we want to train our body, our table group leaders, our ministry leaders, to preach the word. And so that when I was on sabbatical, we handpicked like 6 or 7 of the men and women that were in that seminar from our body, from our church. We paid nobody to preach while I was on sabbatical. We heard voices of our table group leaders, voices of our mission leaders, and they took the ball and they did great. So I think experiencing the love, that's what I would say to a young man, young woman. Hey, love them well, do the hard work. Take your day off, model it, and then incrementally ask for the larger needs that might come up.
That's really critical. You brought up the preaching thing, so let's kind of hit pause right here and talk about that a little bit. Scott, how did y'all fill your pulpit while you were out? How'd that happen?
Well, we had just brought a guy on staff that was leading worship for us, who also had a skill set to where he could preach.
Okay.
It was really nice. But I had been pouring into a couple of people in our congregation over the past 3 years, 4 years, helping them develop their skill set in preaching. So we were able to have of the 5 or 6 weeks that I wasn't preaching, I think we had 3 or 4 of the weeks in-house, and then Waypoint sent somebody to come speak for us one week. But besides that, we were able to, when I look at scripture, I see that they created disciples and they raised up their own people. And if you look around, there's that skill set there. And, if I'm as educated as I am, that they told me I had to be a minister, and if I can't teach someone to do what I do, then we have bigger problems. So I started early on developing preachers within our congregation, and we were able to really rely on them through that time period.
I love that. I don't know how you guys preached the first time. I remember real well. I was like 15 and had great youth minister who went on to teach Old Testament at Cincinnati and then finally down at Point in Atlanta. Best Old Testament guy I know. But anyway, I was privileged to have him as my youth minister. My first sermon he wrote, and I preached it. And it was like 6 minutes long, and everybody came around me. Oh, what a great job! You're going to make a really good preacher one day. And I thought they were giving me a compliment until later on I realized they're probably saying, "You really stink now, but maybe one day you can." The second time, I wrote my sermon with him training me how to study a passage and develop the sermon, and I wrote it, and he gave me some pointers, and I preached it, and so there's huge value in what you guys have talked about. Gregg, I know that you shared with me that that's similar to what you did with those individuals that you could just see potential. I mean, not everybody needs to preach. Obviously, not everybody has the gift of teaching or preaching, but there are people in the church that do. Gary Johnson with E2 is the strongest proponent in smaller rural churches, especially. And y'all are not going to find somebody come in full time and follow the guy that left and been there for 30 years. It's just not going to happen. And who do you have? And so that's what I am constantly talking when churches reach out to us, smaller churches. How can you help us find a new preacher? And if they're 30 or 40 or 60, you're not going to hire anybody, and you don't need to. You really don't need to. And there are probably some guys in your church that, if asked and trained, they would be thrilled to do that. And I would suggest that they don't have to be 35 or 40. They could be 15, like I was. And so, Joe, how did y'all fill the pulpit at Smithfield?
We actually had a similar thing to where we have 2 guys. At the time, there were 2 guys that had been preaching off and on for me. One of them is actually graduate of MACU years ago, and so he's got formal training. The other one is just real confidence being up in front of people and speaking, and so kind of giving him some opportunity to kind of learn and grow. So yeah, we were really blessed in that we didn't have to. I kind of asked the 2 guys. I said, "Would you guys be interested in designing a sermon series between the 2 of you and running with it for 5 weeks?" And they said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Right on, man, go for it."
I love that, and I'm hearing that more and more and more. And I did that same thing that I did when we were when I was leaving. Actually, had a couple staff members that filled in for me and preached, and that was a really good thing. Well, let me back up just a bit, and let's talk about how you communicated. First of all, with your staff and with your key leaders, your volunteer leaders and your whole congregation, that you're going to do a sabbatical, and why. How did you make that communication piece happen? Who wants to go first? Raise your hand. I don't care. I see that grin there, Scott. So you go first, buddy. How did you communicate what you were going to do?
Well, for me, it was fairly easy. We only had one full-time guy, and he was newly full-time. And then I had a couple of part-time people. And my part-time people have been with me for a while, and they saw it. Like I was just not the person I normally am. and they saw it coming. So when I mentioned it, they were like, good, it's time for you to go. And he was excited about getting the opportunity to preach. So when I talked to him about that, and making sure that he knew that I had confidence in him and stuff, that was good. And then being able to stand up in front of the congregation and let them know, like, here are the things that have been happening. Here's how long I've been doing this. Here's what it takes to start a church, and then to keep it going through, 2 different locations as you're planting and setting up and tearing down for 10 years is like, and they understood. So I'm very upfront. I don't hide much of anything from anybody. So our congregation knew I was struggling. Like, if you walk into my church on Sunday morning, they ask me how I'm doing. If I'm not having a great day, I tell you, I'm not having a great day. Like, we're gonna figure it out. And because of that, that's one of the advantages I think we have when we plant a church, is we get to set the culture. I don't come in and have to develop the culture or anything else. We set the culture. And the fact that I was able to say, I'm not doing good and I haven't been for a while, they were like, well, what do you need? And when I told them, they were on board. It was sort of that easy.
Scott, that's a transparency that oftentimes in the church we don't have, because I think most of the time we set people up to lie. How you doing? I'm doing great.
Well,
No,
it's
you're not.
also, it's being able to set the culture. The fact that I had, what, 4 years before I had any elders that were from internal elders, like, they got to understand that I'm going to struggle, and I'm going to say things that I probably shouldn't have said, and I'm going to have to come back, and I'm going to have to apologize and ask forgiveness, and you get a whole bunch better at that. But if you don't bring in your elders, like, you're worried about saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing or acting the wrong way and getting fired, so you can't be transparent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
That's the advantage we have in church plants, I think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, Greg, I know you did a lot of work in giving your people information about, this is what sabbatical is, this is why, this is what it looks like. A lot of written information. You shared a lot of those documents with me, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
How did you go about that, and why?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing for me was that in everything that we do, everything is intentional. If we give somebody a pay raise, it's intentional. If we give them parental leave, it's intentional. And so setting the culture and training the culture is that I don't want to just put words out there that then they rubber stamp permission and begrudgingly say, yes, take your 3 months and go. I want to disciple people. And there's no better litmus test to a discipled church if your pastor can step away. And so I am
Greg,
flipping.
would you repeat that? When you and I had
Um,
lunch and we were talking about sabbaticals, man, that was the hottest thing that you said. I
yeah.
love that so much. I wish I would have said it, honestly. Say that phrase
Well,
again.
it's not original with me, and all the research and trying to communicate to the church and to communicate, I came across it, and just the idea that I'm flipping the script to let them know that they are not just giving me permission, but they are then taking up the calling, the mantle which God's given me. It's like almost like putting my stole, the pastor's stole that he would wear to do a wedding, putting that around and deputizing or ordaining, if you will, essentially that there's no better litmus test for a discipled church than for their pastoral staff to be able to step away and get the rest they need. And it really, one of my prayers while I was away, Lord, let it grow, because I stepped away at a time post-COVID where we were beginning to see growth. So for me, the month before going on sabbatical, I used those 4 weeks in our weekly email. The first one was on what is a sabbatical. The second one was on why a sabbatical now, which started with the list that essentially said there is no greater threat to this church than an unhealthy pastor, number one, right? And then on down the list. The third one was who's in charge and what's going to happen. Like, what's the nitty gritty? What are the details? What if somebody dies? And my elders asked me, what if somebody dies? And I said, I want a phone call from you if somebody dies. If somebody gets in a car accident and doesn't die, let me know. But don't plan on me flying home from wherever I'm at. You guys can take care of it, or the other pastors can take care of it. Or if I'm just hyperbolic, right? And then, and then on the website, it was critical to put something on the website. As Joe was saying, he did the little minute or 2-minute weekly things just to put them there. We chose deliberately just to put it on the website. And then our worship pastor, she would oftentimes say, hey, our lead guy is away right now, wherever we might have been. And so, but for me, the information wasn't just information. It was, how can I write this in such a way that they will catch the vision of a kingdom that's coming and enter into that rest now, because it's available, and we just burn ourselves out through the daily grind. And I ultimately want to model a life that is Sabbath seeking, and not just in the weeks away, because that's all of us would say, did we get the rest we really needed? No. Did we get the healing we needed? No. But the thing that for me, I was reminded while I was away of the fire in my belly to preach the gospel. I needed to go away to say, do I still have it? Because if I don't, I need to sell cars, sell insurance, do something. But if that fire is there, I'll come back. And so
I just love that. I in my job being able to meet up with leaders all the time. I tell people that I get paid to drink coffee and eat lunch with pastors. I got the greatest job in the world, but that's just the platform to be able to listen to their stories. But one of the things oftentimes I'll ask, especially if there's a guy just really discouraged, really down, really close to giving up, I will ask, tell me about your calling. What drew you into ministry? That fire, what put the fire in your belly? Explain that to me. And now, how can we help you walk in that once again? That's powerful stuff. Joe, how about you? How did you communicate to your church that this is what I'm going to do and this is why?
Really, it's a lot of what the guys have already said of starting off and just communicating to leaders and trying to prepare them. And in many ways, it was a benefit in that being at a smaller church, we've about 100 a week in attendance. And so there were a lot of things that we don't have staff that do, and little things that would kind of rise to the surface of, okay, who's going to do this while Joe's gone? And so it was good because it really kind of not only surfaced those things, but it forced us to help put other people overseeing those things and serving in those areas, so that even once I came back, they could still continue on with it. But then even in the same way too, of like what Gregg said, of using those times leading up to it, of kind of explaining to the congregation. We do in November every year, we do what we call our Vision Sunday, where we kind of look back over the past year and look ahead. And it was at that Sunday when one of our elders shared the plan for me to be gone for 5 weeks in the coming year, the coming February. And then it was between then and February that I was able to kind of explain through a variety of different ways, whether it's through emails or even talking on Sundays, or through Facebook Lives we do every once in a while with our church and stuff, just to kind of help unpack what that means, what a sabbatical is all about. And not to, I think some guys almost unfairly get mad at their church that they don't know what a sabbatical is. They don't know why I'm taking a sabbatical. It's like, oh, well, help them understand, do the job of bringing them along to see the reason why, and then to also see the reason why they need that kind of rest within themselves too. It's not just about, well, just my pastor needs a break. We all need that break. We all need that rest, and all need that time away.
Joe, can I? And sorry, Neil.
Please.
There's just said something that was just fascinating to me, and I don't have to be too quick, but I want to know what Scott says as well. You said February. You took yours in February. I started in May. Scott, when did you start? And how strategic were you guys based on the calendrical of it versus you just had to do it and you did it now? And would you do it again that way?
I did
For
mine.
me, well, go ahead, Scott. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry about that. I did mine in July, and it's a low attended month for us, has been. So I knew it'd be an easier way. People would feel more comfortable. Fewer people would notice that I was gone because our church is a sort of a white collar church, and everybody has vacation homes or lake houses, and they're gone, and they'll show up once or twice a month when they're normally there every third or fourth week normally throughout the year. So it was a little bit easier for me, and I wasn't at the point where it had to happen today. I was able to look forward a little bit for it.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
For me, I did it with kind of with our calendar in mind of our church. That was a little bit more of a lower point of kind of the lull of right before Easter and stuff. But I intentionally ended it with going to the Exponential Conference. I wanted, knowing myself, I needed something to almost catapult me like back into the office and wanting to get back into it so I wanted something that would kind of put me on that mountaintop experience so that I would be ready to kind of run back downhill into it. And so I kind of made sure I ended it with that.
Let me share my screen here, and I want to do that because I want to share several books that I came across here on the book, and I have several, and I would really recommend for guys that are saying, "Man, this is something I need to do, but I'm not exactly sure how to go about it." Sabbatical Preparation Workbook. This is great, and it's a short read, and the author talks about the why. He gives a case study of three Bible characters who essentially took time away, sabbatical: Moses, Elijah, and Jesus. And Elijah was, man, he was at the end of it. He's, in fact, during his sabbatical, he said, "God, take me. I am done. I don't even want to live anymore." But anyway, this is a great guide. It walks you through communicating. It talks about why you need sabbatical. It helps, talks about planning, thinking about what you're going to try to do during your sabbatical. The other two books are both great. This last one, I picked it up and did not realize, Desperate Rest, that it was written by a pastor's wife who is making the case for pastor wife sabbaticals. And I never thought about that before. Fascinating, especially in the church where the pastor's wife, there's more pressure on her than the pastor, and we know that, and understand that. And but I want to stop sharing that and get back over here and jump ahead because we don't have very much time left. And let me get here back to full screen, and let's talk about maximizing the time, the sabbatical that you actually had. Okay, we're done with the setup, communicating with the church. Y'all did a great job in talking about that. But let's talk about maximizing the time. I read somewhere, somebody said the best thing you can do on a sabbatical is take a nap. And literally, I think it's important to block out times for rest. And that is, in our culture, that is so foreign. If you're resting, you're lazy. Well, not according to God, not according to God, as he described Sabbath. Let me just ask you this. We'll go through several questions. What books, 2 or 3 books that y'all read that were critical during your time? Joe, did you have that you might recommend to somebody else?
Actually, I didn't do any reading all that time. For me, I've never been a big reader.
Okay.
And all my college professors will agree with that. And so for me, it was more of, and because of that, I always tend towards leadership books, things like that. And so work, related books. And so for me, it really, I knew that if I put a goal of books, it wasn't going to happen, and I was going to beat myself up for it afterwards. So
I love it.
you shouldn't have started with me.
No, it's great. Scott, how about you? That's a good start.
For me, my coach, it was great to have coaching on this. He said, if you're going to start this, start it off just tearing off the Band-Aid. Don't do anything. don't go to another church, don't read a book, don't do anything until you feel like you're starting to catch your breath a little bit. And I probably should have done a sabbatical a little bit longer. I went out and spent a week with him, which was good because I was somewhere other than normal. I may have read one book. I just really jumped into the background, the context, and the culture of the Jewishness of the scriptures. So I might have read one book on that, but besides that, I didn't read, because the problem that I have is what I enjoy reading is all right around what I do. I only read things like I think God made me to be a pastor. I love to read about how to prepare for a sermon. I love to study other preachers. I love to study the background, the context, the culture, and the geography, and like I love to study all of that stuff. So for me to say, to separate me and find enjoyment in reading and me as the pastor, I couldn't do it. So I don't know that I picked up any books during that.
Greg, I saw you give a thumbs up, I think, when
I just think it's great that these guys, I think it's great. I think that's the thing. Like, it's sabbatical is pointing to our disordered desires. It's pointing to our desires that have been for healing, for preaching the gospel, and those have been fried. And so to go on sabbatical and say, now work, it just sounds a lot like something Pharaoh would say. And so I love that they didn't read. I love that it was just, until I have the desire again, my answer is no. I love that you didn't go to church, Scott. There was several weeks that I didn't go to church. And my dad, who has been a pastor for 53 years, would, yeah, exactly. Like, if I want to, I will. And so I think there's so much freedom in that. Just like, so for me, I read Dave Grohl's autobiography, Storyteller, from the Foo Fighters. I read Graham Greene's beautiful book of a Mexican priest who is full of debauchery, the power and the glory. I read Malcolm Guite's poetry. So I stuck to fiction, poetry, and biography was what I stuck to in reading.
That's really good stuff. I told y'all that we did New South Wales, Australia, and that's right on the coast. Everybody in Australia lives right on the coast. The outback is out back, a long way away from the coast. Everybody lived on the coast, and we lived probably 7-8 minutes, a minute drive from my favorite beach, Dudley Beach in Charlestown, where we lived. And the deal was, we were there, our summer, their winter, but their winter is like Southern California weather, shorts and sweatshirt, kind of weather. And then you might come down to your t-shirt at 12 o'clock for an hour and a half, and then you're putting your sweatshirt back on. And at 3 o'clock, it's starting to get pretty chilly once again. My wife and I spent a huge amount of time at midday at the beach, and it was a gorgeous, absolutely crazy gorgeous beach. And honestly, the only book I took was my Bible and my journal and my ink pen. That was it. And it wasn't like, okay, I got to read the whole Old Testament or whatever. No, it was just spending time with God and let His Holy Spirit lead me and guide me in that. And it's such a sweet, sweet time of His refreshing my spirit and soul. And man, it was just absolutely wonderful. That and eating at every other night at a great seafood restaurant, and takeout or whatever. And it was, but anyway, that was my reading. So let me ask you
Let me
this.
jump in here real quick.
Yeah.
For the guys who are planting, and they're going to move into this. My wife and I planted the church. She was one of my part-time staff members, still is one of my part-time staff members, which I recommend against. I don't care how good of a worship minister your wife is or children's minister your wife is. I recommend against it because you never get off work. But the hard thing was, I'm taking a sabbatical and she's not. She went every Sunday, and she was there when we started. She was there setting up, and she was there tearing down, and she was there in the heartache and having the tough meetings in my living room those first 8 to 10 years, that was tough. So to figure out what to do with your wives so that they can step back, so that they can sabbatical at the same time, one, getting them into that mindset, and then two, making sure that your church is also good with that, because at that point, we had just came on to 2 full-time staff members and 2 part-time, and one of them was my wife. So if the preacher and the children's minister leave, that's sort of hard. We didn't figure that out very well, but for these guys who are getting into church planting and their wives are right there with them, when you take a sabbatical, how are you going to handle that? And as much as you can get your wife on board to take it, and to get your leaders on board to understand that both of you need to take it, would be a huge step.
I agree with that 100%. And as I mentioned, that book earlier, Desperate Rest, that focuses on wife sabbatical. Man, that opened my eyes, and I started asking guys, has that ever happened in your church where the wife does sabbatical? And that's a whole different issue, because she describes, her husband's at church, she's not there. Have y'all split up? And all that sort of thing, and having to answer those questions and on and on. How much travel did you do? Did you do retreats? Was it like you were out and in, or what did you do, Gregg?
Let me go first and just get this out. So I did two weddings the weekend before the sabbatical. On the following Monday, I flew to Colorado for 10 days. After Colorado, flew to Missouri to see my family for 10 days. I think it was 10 days. Flew home for a hot minute, took my oldest son to Portugal. Flew to Portugal for almost another 2 weeks just with him, which was great father-son time. Then came back, drove to Ohio to see grandparents in Ohio. Drove back to see parents in Annapolis after that. I think in the month of July, I think I slept in my own bed like 2 nights. I cannot tell you how terrible that planning was. I don't know I don't know why I didn't realize this, but I just felt like I'm gonna go on sabbatical. The 8 hours that I had to pray, that I had to work, I'm gonna spend time in prayer, and realizing I've got a 2-year-old. And so I went in with rose-colored glasses, just thinking it was going to be so great. It took me 2 weeks of being the grumpiest, I can't say the kind of language I normally would say for this, but I was not fun to be around for the first 2 weeks of sabbatical. Not only am I detoxing from all the digital stuff, detoxing from the work stuff and all of that, then my expectations of rest on top of it were just shot out the window. So for me, it took 2 weeks to really understand I am taking a sabbatical away from my church family to lead and rest and love and find joy in my family. And so once I grasped that, I felt like my expectations were much better. And for the last 2 months, it was much better. But travel wise, if I had to do it all over again, we crammed way too much. My wife's a teacher, and so it was perfect. So all of us were gone. But if I had to do it over again, it would have been difficult, because maybe I would want to do it in the spring or the fall when my kids were on their normal school routine, and then I would have those times. But I traveled too much. Don't recommend it. And I didn't end on a high like Joe did. Ended on a whimper.
Okay, so we're almost up against the stop time. Joe, let me give you 30 seconds to describe.
I didn't do much traveling. Other than I tried to once a week, I went to a pastor that I either respected or looked up to, or I wanted to get to know better. Went and bought them lunch and hung out with them. And then, like I said, I finished up with the conference at the end of it before I came back. And actually, we got back from the conference on like a Friday, and then the very next day, we took our kids on a little weekend trip, just our family, before we really kind of jump back in, because we wanted, sort of like what you guys were saying, we wanted that sabbatical for them too, something fun for them.
Good. Scott?
I didn't. I went The first week out of the pulpit, I went out and I spent 4 days with my coach out in Idaho. Because I know I'm going to detox. I know I'm going to be hateful and mean. So I was trying to set up a sort of a slow detox. I went out and I spent 4 or 5 days with him and his family, and slowly started getting out of it. And then after that, I think it was in the summer, so we might have done a 3 or 4 day vacation. Besides that, I was at home the rest of the time.
Wow. Guys, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the wisdom that you have shared. And I hope that you piqued the interest of some guys and kind of a takeaway. It's not a one size fits all, and sabbatical is not about just sitting in the corner singing kumbaya. It can be many multiple different things. And it's not vacation, but it's about resting and renewing your soul and your spirit and your mind, to be able to come back with a fresh desire to lead your church and preach God's word again. I just concur with all that. Well, I've got about 14 questions that I would have loved to have asked y'all, but we don't have time, and we're going to keep it to 55 minutes today, as we promise always. And I just want to thank my panelists for being on board tonight, and thank those that have joined us live or will join us on the YouTube channel in the future. So we're going to sign off right now and say till next month, when we're going to be talking about how to prep for a capital campaign. And I believe Malcolm Puckett is the presenter on that. And so that will be exciting for folks that are totally into that. Guys, I just want to thank you and say have a blessed Christmas, and enjoy your family, and enjoy your church family as well. So God bless you. See you. Good night, folks.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for
Neil.
joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.